The golden age of America begins right now. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our government confronts a crisis of trust. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster. All of this will change starting today.
Donald Trump there sealing his unprecedented political comeback as he returns to the White House, sworn in as the 47th President of the United States.
Mr. Trump began his second term with a scathing rebuke of his predecessor, that's Joe Biden, and a promise to unleash a flurry of executive orders that would dismantle policies that shaped the U.S. and the rest of the world over the last 4 years.
Well, for more insights on the president's executive actions and what we can expect in the coming days and weeks, let's speak with Ylan Mui, Managing Director of the Penta Group. Ylan, thanks for joining us this morning. Now, let's look at Trump's speech. So some quotable quotes, I suppose. Golden age of America, reversal of horrible betrayal, and that America's decline is over, among other things. We also heard some jabs at the outgoing administration. Your assessment of his inauguration address, how this compares to his speech in 2017 that kind of struck a darker tone, some other key points for you as well. He ended talking about the Panama Canal. Really, what stood out and how you assess his speech?
Well, believe it or not, I thought the speech was actually more optimistic than the one that he gave back in 2017, which is now widely known as the American Carnage speech, where he laid out a pretty dark vision of what the country was going through at the time. In this case, he said that there is an optimism for the future, even as you mentioned, he sort of made those jabs at his predecessors, including President Biden, saying that today should be remembered as a liberation day from the policies of the past. So, drawing that stark contrast with those who came before him, but also saying that, there is hope on the horizon. I saw that President Trump did try to, strike some bipartisan tones by shaking President Biden's hand before he went up on stage, but clearly there is still a lot of political divisiveness in Washington.
Right. So it's also not what we heard, but what we saw. So who was there? Powerful tech CEOs, tech bros, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Sundar Pichai. They're seated prominently in the front row, it seems, based on how the camera's angled. In fact, more prominently than Trump's own cabinet, at least, that's what we're seeing. Talk to us about, the kind of optics, the messaging, the sense on how the administration could move from here on.
Yeah, this was really a who's who of Silicon Valley sitting really in the front row of Trump's inauguration speech. And in fact, you saw one of his stated nominees for Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., sitting behind Sundar Pichai and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg. Notably, they were also able to bring their spouses, while members of Congress, governors, such as Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, were unable to bring a +1 to this event. So, proximity to power is power in Washington. And I think the fact that they were right there at his, sort of at his right hand, if you will, were signs that these are the people who have his ear in the moment. What we know from Trump's first administration is that those who spoke to him most recently, those who speak to him most frequently, are those who have the most influence over his policies. So you did hear him call out for the end of an age of censorship by Silicon Valley during his inauguration speech. And I think that is a direct reflection of the relationship that he's built with some of these tech CEOs.
Yeah, Ylan, whoever was in that front row, they were definitely listening. And the world leaders were also there. Most importantly, they were mostly the conservative ones, the right-wing ones as well, like Italy's Giorgia Meloni and Argentina's Javier Milei. And that triggered Hungary's PM Viktor Orban to say that Trump's presidency will set off a new right-wing surge in Europe. Does it look that way to you? And what could that mean for the new tariffs that Trump has pledged to impose on EU imports?
Yeah, so 2 points on that really. One is that, whether it's world leaders or business leaders, you really are seeing quite the bear hug from the business community and from the world's top policymakers of the second Trump administration. There was a report out today by PwC that found that global business leaders, 60% of them felt that the economy globally would be stronger in the coming year than it has been in previous year. That's up from 38% who said that the economy would be strong last year. And so while there are sort of technological advances like AI, et cetera, that are driving some of that, a lot of that has to do with what businesses are seeing as sort of the Trump economic policies. So tariffs had been the one that we're most worried about. But today what we saw is that the Trump administration is sort of holding back from imposing those 10 to 20% across the board tariffs that he had threatened during the campaign, that instead they just want to study what the impact of some of these tariffs might be. Also holding back on imposing those 60% tariffs on goods imported from China. So it seems like, again, those business leaders might be able to bend the president's ear in order to get him to hold off from the policies that they believe would be most detrimental and instead focus on the things that they're truly excited about, including deregulation and potentially a large tax package.
So not so much of a focus on tariffs this inauguration, but we did hear that he's going to be signing some executive orders that will focus on overhauling border energy policies. In fact, he's at the Capital One Arena right now as we speak, and I saw him holding a folder, I suppose, symbolic of the executive orders that he will be signing. Realistically, can he push through with undoing some of Biden's policies, especially on immigration, border, energy, the likelihood of them facing legal challenges? I think one was ending birthright citizenship. Is it going to be so easy for him to push through?
Well, certainly not. I mean, obviously that would require a constitutional amendment, which is he's unlikely to get. I think one of the important parts of the executive order signings is really a signaling effect to what the direction of the administration will be. We'll have to see the exact wording of the orders he ends up signing. There are some that he described as taking certain steps, but maybe in the sort of letter of the language, we might see a slightly different posture. For example, he also discussed the potentially extending the ban on or delaying the ban, on TikTok. That's not something that it's clear that President Trump actually has the authority to do. But I think the point is here that he's trying to take as much action as possible, as quickly as possible. And that is very different from what we saw in Trump 1.0. I think this time around, you're seeing that he understands how the levers of power work in Washington. He's not afraid to use them. And in fact, you're seeing the Senate meeting tonight in order to work on confirming some of those nominees to key cabinet positions. So the grind has already begun, and it's clear that this time President Trump has learned some lessons from his first administration and intends to operate as expeditiously as possible.
Okay, let's just reflect a little on the outgoing President Joe Biden, his extraordinary decision to announce a preemptive pardon on people Trump would go after in his presidency, a shield, if you will. This is a full presidential power play, Ylan, and could it establish a precedent for Trump himself in 4 years? Can you reflect on this for us? And how will powerful Americans then be protected down the road?
Yeah, this was pretty astounding. This happened in literally the final minutes of President Biden's term, where he issued a pardon, a preemptive pardon, essentially for his family members. And he said he was doing so because he was worried about potential political retribution from the Trump administration. This is something that President Biden had sort of lamented and worried that President Trump would do when he was leaving office back in 2020 and 2021. And now we're seeing President Biden do exactly the same thing. So, one of the things that kind of struck me during this inaugural day was that even amongst all the pageantry we saw, even amid all the pomp and circumstance, and as I mentioned, some at least glimmers of bipartisanship, you just need your pinky fingernail to scratch the surface a little bit and see that there is still some bitter, deep divides in Washington, and that both President Biden, both President Trump, Republicans and Democrats, that is not going away, and in fact, might be even more entrenched than it was before.
All right, Ylan, thank you for breaking that down. For us, Ylan Mui, the managing director of the Penta Group.